And a man who equally knows lots about this subject is Edward Lucas, author of The New Cold War and After, and he joins us from Washington, D.C. in the United States. Edward, thanks very much for joining the debate.
Hello, good afternoon.
Please tell us the thesis of your book, if you would.
Well, I lived in Eastern Europe under communism, and I don't share the memories of your previous caller. I must say my first wife was an East German whose family had been very cruelly divided by the war, and I had many friends who were in prison or under threat of prison or had been forcibly incarcerated in psychiatric hospital. And I wouldn't even actually agree that the education system was particularly good. I think it stressed some things at the expense of others. But having seen that first collapse of the evil empire, as Ronald Reagan called it, and the liberation of tens of millions of people from the Baltic to the Black Sea, I carried on covering the region, and I became very worried about what's happening to Russia. And as the old ex-KGB people came back into power, ending the brief period of sort of semi-democracy that we had in the 1990s.
That's the one under Boris Yeltsin, you mean?
Yeah, and I saw Putin and his pals coming back in. I decided this was A, very bad for Russia, and B, very bad for us. And that's what I wrote the book about.
So you preferred that brief moment when Boris Yeltsin was giving Russia's wealth away to the oligarch gangsters. That's what you call freedom and democracy, is it?
Well, I think it was very imperfect. It was probably it was an extremely bad privatization, and I think you can go through it now and look at all sorts of things that went wrong. It may have been the best that was available at the time, because at that time the Soviet economy was completely wrecked and it was just not producing anything, and having some sort of private ownership may have been the best way of starting it. But I do agree that the rise of the oligarchs has been extremely sinister, particularly the sort of politicized ones who, the latest generation, who owe their wealth and power to the Kremlin. I think the best one could say about the 1990s was there was a kind of pluralism of economic power. The people at the top didn't run everything, and so you had a bit of disagreement, which then meant you had pluralism in the media. You could turn on the telly and hop from channel to channel, and every news would tell you something different, whereas now you turn on the telly and hop from channel to channel, and the news is always the same.
A bit like here. Edward, the Chinese model...
I wouldn't quite agree with that, actually. I mean,
well, you're sitting in the United States of America, as I have many times in the last 12 months, and trust me, hopping from news channel to news channel in the United States of America, all the news is the same.
Well, I'm not sure you can really say that. And if you look at Fox News, that takes a sort of violently anti-Obama, for very robust Republican viewpoint, apparently makes out Obama as a traitor. You turn on CNN, it's a much more centre-left, MSNBC, much more centre-left than PBS.
CNN, centre-left? My goodness. Anyway, we're not here to debate American television. Let me just ask this.
You started it.
Yes, I did, because it's typical, I think, of the double standards of neocons like you, that you
I beg your pardon.
ascribe...
Mr. Galloway, why do you think I'm a neocon? You've no idea.
I think you're a neocon because I heard what you said about the halcyon days of the Yeltsin Kremlin.
You misunderstand me. I don't think they were halcyon at all. I think that they were a period of tremendous chaos and humiliation and disruption for the people of Russia. And I can well understand why, at the end of that, they wanted to something that would bring them some order and stability. All I'm saying is that what they've actually got is even worse. I would certainly not say that the 1990s were good for Russia. I suspect that even if a politician as sapient as yourself had been running Russia in 1991, you might have found your option list of actual workable options pretty short.
Well, I was going to canvass one of those options with you, and that's the Chinese option. Couldn't Russia have had a softer landing with less loss to the people and the national treasury, if you like, if it had gone down that road?
Well, it's a very interesting question, that. Now, the trouble is that the Russian economy, or the Soviet economy, had been run in a very different way to the Chinese. You had two huge problems. One was that the Chinese economy still had a large agricultural base, and when they started the reforms, the first thing they did was to free the peasants, and that created what I wouldn't call exactly an agricultural or rural middle class, but it created sort of rural, solid working class, sort of post-communist serfdom, and that was the basis then for the migration into the cities and the growth of industry. The Soviet Union couldn't do that because they'd already completely wrecked agriculture through collectivization, and so they didn't have that chance of starting that way. The second problem was that in their final years of the Soviet Union, they'd been running the printing presses absolutely red hot, so there was a tremendous, what economists call monetary overhang, which to you and me is just a colossal amount of paper money floating around with nothing to spend it on. And that meant that there was huge shortages in the shops, that the people had money in their pockets, the prices were fixed, nothing to buy. And any way out of that was going to be very painful. The Chinese didn't have that. They've kept the printing presses turning fairly slowly, and so they never had that huge pent-up inflation. I think where you're right is that if back in the 1960s under Khrushchev, if Khrushchev hadn't been toppled, if they'd gone down a Chinese road then we might have had a chance of a much better outcome.
Edward, it's been a pleasure talking to you, even if we have disagreed. Edward Lucas, author of The New Cold War and After. And he has a point of view, so does Carl and Plasto, but you'll need to wait for that, because I want to go back